Hey guys, welcome back to another Game Time Discussions episode. My name is Cameron Selby, and we're going to be breaking down the Week 14 showdown slate between the Dallas Cowboys and the Detroit Lions. This might be the most exciting on paper Thursday night game of the year. And we've had some good ones, we've had some bangers, but not only a DFS slate because there's injury news and all that stuff to open up some value on this slate, but also just what it means aesthetically. This should be a shootout, highest total on the entire week. And on top of that, last time we remember watching these two teams, they put up some fireworks. Week 17, I think in 2023, when Dallas played, I remember having CD needing some big points and big day from him. That's his 92-yard touchdown, having 200 plus yards, going for 40 plus fantasy points. Had him on a Thursday. I had him on that showdown, the main, all this stuff on top of that in some fantasy championships, and it worked out in a very awesome way. So I'm excited to see what comes. Hopefully it doesn't let us down. If you are new to this channel, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you're going to approach this slate going forward. This is week 14. This is the final week of the regular season for best ball, right before the fantasy playoffs for a lot of redraft leagues. And so we're getting down to the nitty gritty officially in December, and I'm ready to keep on rocking and rolling. Thanksgiving slate went awesome for us. Once again, it was awesome. Showdown, not so much. It was up and down a little bit for our main slate. If you do follow our lines in Discord, we put our exposures out anytime we do play lines. We like to play every kind of contest. We're not just throw 150 lines into every single contest with all this money. We don't have that. We hand build. We like to do it. We play for the fun of the game, and it's exciting to do so. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this content. Enjoy this video. Let us know what you think. We want to keep on interacting with you guys. On top of that, college content, where we have the bowl pick'ems and fantasy champion, especially in terms of the college realm, when we're about to have the playoff be announced next week. We have the conference championship week this week and bowl pick'ems and all that fun stuff. And I don't know how we're going to approach that going forward, but either way, it's going to be a whole lot of fun, especially when you just are a football fanatic like we are. So yeah, without further ado, after that long intro, let's get right into this. So kicking it off, we're going to start off with the away team as always, and then we're going to break down the Dallas Cowboys, who are just absolutely on fire. Did not see this coming, and all of a sudden, after one of the toughest on paper stretches of the season, they've won back-to-back games against teams that were in the Super Bowl last year in a span of 4 days, nonetheless. And now they go into Detroit, which we thought this was just going to be an absolute blowout. I think as of last week, Detroit was over a 7-point favorite, if I remember correctly, as a home short week kind of thing. And now, after back-to-back strong results by Dallas, on top of that, the Amon-Ra injury, which we'll talk about in a little bit, now it's all of a sudden a 3-point game. It's the highest spread. Dallas's offense is humming. Their defense is playing better, at least not historically bad anymore. Detroit's almost desperate for a win now because now they're 7-5 all of a sudden. They're 2 full games behind Detroit. They're 2 full games behind Chicago for first place in the division. And all of a sudden, if they lose this game at home, now you got to go to the Rams the following week, going against Pittsburgh, and then at Minnesota and Chicago, respectively, to end your season. All of a sudden, you're looking as a fringe wildcard team, if that. I know Emery flirted with the idea of putting Detroit actually missing the postseason entirely. I didn't get there. I wanted to have them as a preseason not winning the division because I did expect some regression. Now that it looks like they are on the outside looking in terms of being a division winner. So we'll see what happens, but they're desperate for a win. Dallas, despite their impressive results, they definitely need this win as well to continue going because they did drop a couple of marquee games that could come back to haunt them, getting blown out against Chicago, Carolina losing at home to Arizona. Like those 3 NFC losses could really bite them in the long run. I know that they do have a head-to-head against Philly at the moment, but other than that, you've got AFC wins and division wins, so that's not going to get it done. So these kinds of games against Detroit, Minnesota coming up, and then finishing strong against your final 2 divisional opponents, which at this point, because of how depleted both teams are, should win both those games. But even winning out is not a lot for them to make the postseason, which is crazy to think about. But that's neither here nor there. Let's break down the slate, though. Starting it off, it's those 2 guys right there, the best wide receiver duo so far in the sport, I would say, this season so far, especially because of the fact that George Pickens has absolutely crushed it as a first-year member of the Dallas Cowboys. 8 touchdowns, already over 1,100 yards on the season, averaging 95 yards a game, 20 fantasy points. This was absolutely best case scenario plus a little bit with how well he's played this year. On top of that, CD Lamb got banged up, missed a month, and that's really where he started taking off. That was the first game without him was in that Green Bay tie game where he had 36 fantasy points. Followed that up with 2 more games where he scored touchdowns, had another 30-point game, and then since he's been back, he's basically taken turns being the alpha or the dominant fantasy scoring wide receiver. After the bye, back-to-back games, 9 catches, back-to-back games, a touchdown, back-to-back games, about 145 yards. And then last week, I know CD Lamb finally broke out of the hit slump, caught that touchdown, went over 100 yards for the first time in a little bit. He still had 13 targets and 6 for 88. Like, if you're going to have 688 and a 2-point conversion with 16.8 as your floor game, like, we really have to start having a discussion about some things. And he is going to be absolutely paid. He has not gone below 50 receiving yards since week 1, all the way back in his debut against the Philadelphia Eagles. Since then has been 57 yards or better in every single game, with the exception of that New York Jet game where they were blowing them out from ahead, and he just wasn't involved until the very, very end where he caught that deep ball touchdown to truly seal it. Otherwise, he's been nearly 80 yards plus every single game since then. And yeah, $9,400. Because of the injuries, like I said, you're able to afford double stacks with the absolutely obvious options. CeeDee Lamb, it's a price tag thing where they're just basically going to be the same price going forward for the most part. And can both of them go off? Can you pick the right one? But either way, if both of them are going off, especially on a showdown slate, like, you can definitely prosper with the double stack, having both of them at the helm. Like I said, he's kind of been the one struggling in terms of, not even struggling. I mean, you're getting 14 fantasy points for the most part, with the exception of that Philly game where you only had 11 and a half. That was the game when one of those games, George Pickens had 30 plus fantasy points. So you still had 11 targets. The opportunity is there. He's only had 1 game this year where he hasn't had at least 8 targets, and that was 2 games ago against the Las Vegas Raiders, where he still did catch a touchdown and went for 66, where he did catch a touchdown for us. I got there with 17 fantasy points on the showdown slate, but he wasn't the obvious captain because of how well George Pickens did that day. But then this past week, where George Pickens has a floor game, CeeDee Lamb picks up the slack with 27 fantasy points, does very, very well for us on the Thanksgiving slate. And so now, going against Detroit, who are you going to pick? I lean CD, but at the same time, I can't just confidently say lock and load every single CeeDee Lamb captain line, because of the fact that George Pickens is right there in terms of his upside and has just as high as a floor with him at this point. So to me, if you were going to go the route of the Dallas Cowboy receiver at captain, I would mix and match. I wouldn't really have a strong lean. If you do, I hope you're right, but it's not like you have a defined conviction with one or the other. If you want to talk about the other receivers for this team, there's about 5 that play. I could click on Jalen Tolbert, 3 straight games. He's wide receiver 5 in snaps. He doesn't have a catch. So I'm just going to X him out of the pool when he's not below $1,000. Kevontae Turpin, they're kind of getting him a little bit more involved. Each of the last 2 weeks, over 50 yards all purpose. He's also their return man. So if you do have any special team touchdown, you get that 6 extra points. From that perspective, I think he is due for a big chunk play, whether that's a 50-yard touchdown or just a breakaway run. It just feels like that is on the precipice of happening. Like I said, he doesn't get a ton of snaps. Right around, he didn't have a ton of snaps to start the year, with the exception of the games that CeeDee Lamb was out. He hovered around 60%, but then he missed a couple of games himself, came back and was in. And then recently, at least 34% of the snaps each of the last 3 games since the bye. And I know he only had 2 targets against the Raiders. They were also playing from ahead a ton. But each of the last 2 back and forth games where Philly, remember, they were down 21-0 and were playing catch up, had a big 48-yard reception, had a couple carries in there as well. And then this past week, he had a bunch of good returns, which unfortunately that doesn't count from a fantasy perspective, but 33 yards on the ground, 28 yards on 2 receptions as well. So he is definitely in the pool at just $2,400. I'm surprised that he was below $3K based on his seemingly elevated opportunity role in what he's returned. Obviously, you see that 1 point right there at 0.8, 2.7. His floor low, but he is a perfect tournament-esque play if you want to go that route. Brian Flournoy is actually, I know they're pretty much the similar snaps. They're very different receivers, of course. He's the actual prototypical 6', 200 receiver, whereas Devontae Turpin's a gadget, really tiny guy, but just get him out in space. But Florida, right around 35 to 45% of the snaps each of the last 3 games as well. And that's led to 3 for 34, which is pretty solid. Problem is he's $1,000 more expensive. So you can kind of say a similar thing about applying. He also, for what it's worth, does have red zone targets. That Raider game, caught a touchdown right before the bye week. He also had another touchdown he had another touchdown against the Cardinals as well. So he can get red zone targets when CD and George Pickens are also in the fold. So that's why he's probably a little bit elevated. I think I'd side with Devontae Turpin in that regard. But if you are able to afford all 3 of them, I'd say go for it. I think they all have a path to just have a very, very solid day. If you want to go talk about the tight end position, Luke Schoonmaker has not made any kind of impact whatsoever as a fantasy asset. There's certain games where he can get a couple of targets. I would say, I mean, he's before the bye, he had a 5 out of 6 game stretch where he had at least 2 targets, being $1,200 on a Showdown slate. You're open and interested in those kinds of things. I don't think you need to go there because I think everybody's pretty affordable. There's only one guy above 10,000 as a skill player today, and we'll talk about him in a little bit because that's a big decision point later. So I don't even know if you have to go this cheap. If you do, I guess I'd side with Malik Davis because he's had some breakaway kind of plays. It looks like that 2-point floor feels a little better, but at the same time, if he's catching 1 for 10 yards, that's 2 points right there. Detroit's also awesome against the run game as well. Like I said, I don't think you need to go down that low. But Jake Ferguson, he's an interesting price point because he's by himself in that, mid 7K range. His breakout games have kind of subsided since both CD and George Pickens has been healthy. He's more so been touchdown dependent, out with the exception of the Philly game where he had a solid 5 for 60 day. But essentially, you see a lot of these performances where he's under 35 total yards, but he's got a touchdown there, 2 touchdowns there, touchdown there, but you're not getting a lot of yardage. So he's having a lot more floor performances rather than ceiling performances. And then his ceiling performances were awesome. This game, and this game. Yeah, like he's had these ceiling performances. I mean, started out the year with a 12 and a 14 target game, but this game, all of those were without CeeDee Lamb. He's only really had one strong day when CeeDee Lamb has been in the fold. He caught 7 passes for 29 yards, but he scored twice. That is essentially why he was able to get there. And if you're 2 touchdown or bust, that's tough to get to. This is going to be an interesting kind of point and talking point, similar to how I viewed the New England slate, which I know we didn't break down the Monday night slate. But when Hunter Henry is only getting, a floor performance and only 3 times out of the year he's going above 10 fantasy points, and it's only when he's scoring touchdowns or going against the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't know if you need to. I'm not saying he's out of the player pool, but it's tough to believe in the ceiling performance when obviously the way to attack Detroit is on the perimeter. And then run game, like I said, Javonte Williams, he's the bell cow. Once again, they're just continuing to just healthy scratch Jaden Blue even after the bye. So that was a massive miss for people that thought this would be some kind of committee. Javonte has been at least 78% of the snaps all 3 games since the bye. And before that, unless a game wasn't close or it was a bad game script, he's still at least 70%, one of the highest snap shares in all of football. And he's due for a score. I mean, he did catch a receiving touchdown in a tough matchup against Kansas City. They've been really good against running backs all year, and he got there with a touchdown. So 17 fantasy points was a pretty solid day. Otherwise, going against Philly, Las Vegas, Arizona, all tough either game scripts or it was tough matchups. And he still has 23 touches there, 16 touches there, but very efficient. But none of those games scoring, so obviously that's not going to get it done. 9,000. Interesting tournament direction because everybody's going to see that one opponent rank and say he can't get there. But if he scores the touchdown and say CD and or George Pickens one or both of them are held under 100 yards and don't score, he could easily outscore them with just an inefficient 60 yards on 20 touches, but scoring a touchdown, getting 4 catches. I think I still side if I have to just rank them without salary, say one wide receiver, the other wide receiver, and then Javonte. But guess what? Everybody else views that as well. So I would anticipate if you do play 3 max like we typically do on a showdown, 1 out of 3 is definitely going to get you overweight to Javonte. So I'm not saying I'm ruling him out. I don't know if I'm even going to be interested in getting one of the 3 there. But at the same time, I think there's still a path that can be done if he is just happens to punch in a touchdown and the other guy doesn't pan out. And Dak Prescott, there's nothing that you can say bad about him this year. He right now I think would be the second team All Pro quarterback. So he's playing right behind Matthew Stafford in terms of being successful, and as a fantasy asset, could not have been stronger since coming out of the bye. 25, 31, and 24.5. The passing attempts are there, involved on multiple touchdowns, has the 300-yard bonus upside, finally sneaking into the end zone for his second rushing touchdown of the year, which he used to be in the 5 to 6 range, and now it's far and few in between. But he's just got the best wide receiver duo in the sport right now, playing lights out. It's a great matchup, and if he can go off against Kansas City and Philly, you're damn sure he can go off in a dome game against the Detroit Lions, whether it's playing from ahead or behind. He's got 3 touchdown upside, 300-yard upside. I don't really know if I can get away from Dak. I don't see a path with him not panning out in this game unless he is truly just not involved on more than one touchdown and he is held below 300 yards, which is a far ask, especially coming off a game where Jordan Love went into Thanksgiving 3 straight games without a passing touchdown, very little volume, and then has a 4 passing touchdown day against the Detroit Lions. Also, Terrion Arnold now on IR. They're just depleted at corner. Once again, it's a common theme for the last couple of years. We've been targeting the pass game against Detroit secondary, and it's going to be more of the same for me in this contest. On the Detroit side, 2 big things. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Obviously, that's a disappointing thing. If you were investing in him on the Thanksgiving slate, he was rolled up on a block and did not return to the game. Based on him not returning to practice on Tuesday, I don't anticipate him playing. So, with that said, that is a massive, massive deal. And we don't really have a very large sample size of him missing games. In 2024, played all 17 games. He only played he only missed 1 in 2023, 1 in 2022, and then played all in his rookie season. So, really, truly, only 2 game sample size where he doesn't play. And he also plays through injuries typically. So if he is missing, that is truly a big deal. It's honestly an unknown of how to even combat that because on top of Sam Laporta being out for the year now, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown being out, Jameson Williams. The last time he did miss a game, he was not even on the team. So just for shits and giggles, I brought up the 2-game sample with him missing time. One was in 2022, one was in 2023. And it's not like him missing really caused them to not score points. One game, they scored 45 against the Seattle Seahawks. And then the other game, they scored 42 against the Carolina Panthers. So again, neither one really had a huge impact on people missing. But let me roll through some of the game scripts of who was there. And you see back in 2022, most of these guys aren't even on the team or in impact. Jamal Williams, 100-plus yards, 2 touchdowns against Seattle. TJ Hawkinson, 8 for 179 and 2 scores. Josh Reynolds, 7 for 81 in a score. So Jameson Williams still was out because he tore his ACL going into the draft. So he was still inactive for that game. For what it's worth, he was on the team though. And then the other season, Carolina, once again, if I remember correctly, Jameson Williams, that was one of his first games back from suspension. So he had 2 catches, 2 yards, nothing. I don't remember whether or not he would have been chalky, but Sam Laporta, 3 for 47 and 2 scores. Josh Reynolds, 4 for 76 in a score. Otherwise, it was David Montgomery going for over 100 in a score. Craig Reynolds got in there. So there's not really much to take away from a skill perspective. Like we've said with, for example, Jalen Waddle, where the games that Tyreek Hill missed over the sample with him as a Miami Dolphin, with Jalen Waddle in the fold, it's like Jalen Waddle, it's not like his target share increases, but he gets a lot more touchdowns and he has a lot higher of a floor. And we know the ceiling, what comes with it. These two, he doesn't miss games, but 2, most of those guys aren't even on the team based on who even made the impact. And even in this game, in perspective, I think it's an obvious answer of who would make the most of the opportunity, and that's going to be Jameson Williams, who had a 144-yard career-high day, 10 targets against the Green Bay Packers. He caught a touchdown, 94% of the snaps. So for the last 5 games, over 90% of the snaps, and that was with Amon-Ra St. Brown. The thing was, he just had the inconsistent amount of targets. But since Dan Campbell took over the play calling, right around this time, catching touchdowns, he did have a goose egg here, he did have a goose egg here. But if he doesn't have a goose egg over the last 7 weeks, he scored a touchdown. He's gone over 16 fantasy points. So that's what you want to see. I'm shocked because of the information that they had going into pricing this slate that Jameson Williams is only $8,400, because when Amon-Ra St. Brown was rolled up on, I had a strong feeling he wasn't going to return. And it's like, oh, they have a full week. We'll see how he responds. But it sounded like right after that game, they're not going to put him on IR, but he is week to week. I have rarely seen this year somebody be labeled week to week and then playing immediately the following week. I know Amon-Ra is going to try to, but if he's already a DNP, they're not even listing him as limited. Like, they knew that information. And with that said, Jameson is an obvious play at $8,400. I'm shocked that his price is that low. He should be one of the more popular captains. He's kind of a standalone by himself. And then also Khalif Raymond, for what it's worth, who's been playing right around the wide receiver 3 role of snaps, didn't play on Thanksgiving, and now he's already listed as not expected to play. So that opens up even more opportunities. So Isaac Tesla, he's not really had any strong games. He's just had some impressive catches in the times that he gets opportunity. Once again, most of all of this is very little snap share, very little sample size. But I will say, when Amon-Ra went down early in the game, he only played 4 snaps. Isaac Tesla, who's been a wide receiver 3 or 4 in terms of snap share this entire season, went from a season best 46%, and that was way back in week 6, all the way to 92%. So he more than doubled his total snaps in just one sample without Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is the obvious, he's going to be on the field. But even with those 92% snaps, them playing from behind, only had 2 targets, caught both of them for what it's worth. $4,400 though, that is really, really cheap for somebody that's going to be on the field all the time. But also a guy that I didn't even know was even feasible, because we were trying to figure out when Samuel Porter went down, Brock Wright came in, first game, had a bunch of targets, did okay, but on a slate when he's minimum price, it's interesting. Well, he missed last week due to a neck injury. I know we're talking about receiver, but this is important. He's not going to play again. So everybody was like, okay, well, is it going to be Ross Dwelly? Is it going to be Anthony Ferkshire? Well, it ended up being Tom Kennedy, who going into the game did not have a single snap this entire season. He did not have a single snap the entire season. He's kind of the return guy, practice squad guy that only is elevated when they have receiver injuries. In his one game this year, he played 65% of the snaps. 4 for 36, was second on the team in terms of yardage. Second on the team in terms of yardage and opportunity from all pass catchers. I don't know why he's $2,000 if that's what he's going to be elevated, because even with Amon-Ra St. Brown down, that's all that played was Jameson Williams, Isaac Tesla, Tom Kennedy. That was it. Ross Dwelly played 75% of the snaps as tight end. I'm not paying $2,800 for him if he's going to play 75% of the snaps, have 1 catch for 3 yards. And he's already priced up. So Tom Kennedy, if he's going to be on the field 65 to 70% of the time, exactly what I said about Cavante having the quote-unquote special teams upside as well. I'm interested in him, Isaac Tesla, Jameson Williams. There is not a single guy of those 3 or Dallas's big 3 that I'm Xing out, because it is too good of a matchup. And this is exactly where all the points are going to come from, is those 6 receivers. So those are the guys for that. I already kind of briefly talked about all the tight ends. I did want to mention, though, Shane Zylstra. If you're looking for somebody cheap, I don't even know if anybody's going to project him for fantasy points in this game. But I just want to let you know, just in case you're trying to just feed for the bottom for somebody to play. They opened his practice window, 21-day practice window. He's been on IR all the way since week 2. He's a wide receiver converted to tight end. And if they're fiending for tight end production, he's $200. If he plays, I don't expect him to have more snaps than Ross Dwelly, but can he catch a pass? Absolutely can. Can he get a pass? Can he have a target? Can he have an opportunity? Sure he can. I mean, Ross Dwelly had 3 targets. I know he only caught one, I just mentioned. Anthony Ferkshire, he caught 1 pass on 1 target. When they're $2,400 or $2,800, that doesn't sound very interesting. But when you're $200, all you need is a catch to work out. I remember a couple weeks back on the Arizona Showdown slate, I had a buddy that was like Hunter Lipke. And I was like, Lee Davis is $200. I'd rather just go for somebody I know is going to get 45 carries. Maybe he only gets a point, but that's what you need at 200 instead of Hunter Lipke. And I don't even, because I don't have Dallas selected, but Hunter Lipke in that specific game that he brought him up had 3 catches for 36 yards and had a carry as well. And so he had 7 fantasy points for $200. I don't even know if he was owned enough to be in the optimal line, but that is a massive win scenario if you can nail a $200 guy that can get 4 to 5 and optimistically even more. So if there's anybody down below 1,000, once again, I don't even think because of the way all the studs are priced on this slate, you even need to go that low. And just as I mentioned, RotoWire doesn't even have Shane Zylstra projected. But all I'm saying is if Brock Wright misses, which I think he will, one, I think that's more of an elevation of Tom Kennedy, just based on what I saw from him having 0 snaps to 2/3 of the snaps and most of the targets for the wide receiver room. I would take a shot if I'm going Detroit tight end on all the way down to Ross Dwelly. All the way down to Shane Zylstra. That is going to be my approach. On top of that, because he's not being projected, he's got the IR slot. I think he's going to be less than 5% owned. Perfect opportunity to just be tournament-ish and at least salary on the table. So say you have $1,000 remaining and you don't like Luke Schoonmaker, you don't like Jalen Tolbert, you don't like Malik Davis, all the way down Shane Zylstra. Say he catches 2 passes for 20 yards and nobody else gets more than 2 fantasy points. That is a big leverage point. And on top of that, way less duped for whatever specifically you're trying to build. Once again, for the final time, I don't even think you need to go that route. But if you do, I think that would be my preference unless something changes or if he doesn't even play at all. Obviously, omit everything I just said over the last couple of minutes. And then Jared Goff used to be essentially, I've said this time and time again with Jared Goff, it comes down to whether or not he's involved on touchdowns. He's basically Matthew Stafford, funny enough, because they were traded for each other. But because he has no rushing upside, it's essentially whether or not he's going to have the 300-yard bonus and whether or not he's going to have multiple touchdowns. Well, Amon-Ra St. Brown, in theory, that makes things tougher on him to have fantasy upside. Well, he did have a solid 20.5 fantasy point day. On a showdown slate, that's really strong for just $10,000. But the thing is, will he have that upside? This is the matchup to do so. Obviously, if you see that opponent rank, Dallas is dead last against quarterbacks this year. Most of that came before the bye when they were historically bad. They've improved, but still 300-yard game to Patrick Mahomes plus 4 touchdowns. A nearly 300-yard games to Patrick Mahomes plus 4 touchdowns. The week before, you're playing Geno Smith. You're playing Jalen Hurts, who's struggling, but still Jalen Hurts had multiple rushing touchdowns as well to get over 25 fantasy points. I think that double stacking on both sides is very much in play. It's going to be very popular. It's going to be very juicy. Basically, the biggest thing is going to be whether or not you, one, play Jahmyr Gibbs, who I'm going to get to in one moment, or if you're going to go the route of double quarterback. That is the big decision point. A lot of people are probably going to be going the double stack of Dallas in some way, shape, or form, plus either Goff and Detroit skill players, or just going to go all Detroit skill players with spinning up to Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy that broke my heart in week 12 when the morning of the main slate, I had him in 50% of my lines, and I took him out, took a stand, and he had the highest fantasy point day of the entire season, had 58 against the Detroit Lions, over 250 all-purpose yards, 3 touchdowns. You know the rest. It made me very, very sad. But I faded him on the Thanksgiving slate because I was just like, this is a much worse matchup. And I'm just going to say you're not going to keep it up because you went off against Philly, who Philly just got gashed with 2 100-yard rushers last week. So obviously they're all of a sudden not a good matchup against running backs. Washington's been bad all year against running backs and as a defense as a whole. And then the Giants, one of the worst in football against the running game and running backs. So now going against Green Bay, tough matchup. So he was very inefficient. didn't have 10 catches like he did in week 1, where he had no efficiency whatsoever, but he caught 10 passes to get a salvageable 15 fantasy points. Dallas, I know it says 22nd. Before Quentin Williams was there, they were 31st. They've jumped 9 spots in just 3 games. They've shut down Ashton Genty. They've shut down Saquon Barkley. And Kansas City run game is not that strong anyways, but they didn't really get much going either. So with that said, $11,000, because of all the value in the way that this slate is priced, you can get to him without being uncomfortable. But the question is, can he outscore both quarterbacks? That is what I think is going to come down in this slate. I think the only possible way he does, because I don't expect him to have a 100-yard bonus game on either side, whether it's receiving or rushing. The only way I see that happening is if he has a multi-touchdown game or if he has 10 receptions. He's capable of both. It's definitely possible. But this is not nearly as good of a matchup as it looks on paper, at least from that opponent rank. He is going to be one of the highest owned players on the entire slate. Right now, he is showing as the highest owned skill player. If you're going to find a way to get different, do I fade Jameer third week? Is this basically it's tied 1-1 in terms of a horrible decision versus a great decision, and this week is the tiebreaker? Maybe that's what I'm going to do. I don't know. But that's basically the biggest question of this entire slate to me, is whether or not you want to go with a Dallas double plus a Detroit double, or are you going to go with Dallas double plus Detroit skill players, and including Jameer Gibbs in that matter. David Montgomery, on the other hand, I was a lot more interested in him in recent weeks and games when he was 5,200 on Showdown slates. He's played a lot of Showdown slates recently. But when he's $7,000 and just as bad of a matchup as I just mentioned about Jameer Gibbs, I don't see a path for him at 7,000 paying off. So I think he is a pretty easy fade to me. Hopefully I don't bite my words while he scores 2 touchdowns, but I don't see any kind of path to pay for him. If it is this guy, David Montgomery, versus that guy, Jake Ferguson, I think Jake Ferguson has a better floor. I think his ceiling is better. I just don't see a path for David Montgomery to have a really, really strong game in this specific one based on the matchup and based on how Dallas has been playing against the run recently. Much rather play Jameer Gibbs on top of that. It's not like they're a huge 50-50 split now. I mean, it is still Jameer Gibbs getting 70% of the work. It is no longer a David Montgomery first series and then Jameer gets a series and series. It's Jameer is getting a couple and then David will get his work. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm not really interested in playing David Montgomery in this specific matchup. Both kickers are awesome. Shout out Jake Bates going to Texas State. Eat 'em up, go Cats, go. This year he's had a couple misses though. It really comes down to whether or not they kick field goals. The problem is they go for it so much on 4th down. If it is 4th and 6 or lower, if they're in plus territory, they're going for it, and that's the problem with investing in kickers like that. So if you're going to go this kicker versus that kicker, obviously we're going to play the best kicker in the sport. Recently, though, there's been a lot of games where he's only kicking 1 field goal, only having 1 opportunity. But in games where they do have multiple kick opportunities, because even though Detroit's defense, they are gettable, it's not like they're just god awful and they're just giving up touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. So a multi-field goal game is certainly in play, and I would not be shocked if he is in an optimal line whatsoever. It is very easy to afford. I think a strong way to be fun and different is, say you play a line that has Jake Ferguson in it. Say Jake Ferguson has the same score as Brandon Aubrey. $2,000 difference. Say instead of whatever you did to get to zeroed out or 100 remainder with Jake Ferguson, putting in Brandon Aubrey, who correlates just as well. But say Jake only gets like 10, but Aubrey gets the 15 field goals. Nobody will have that line that has 2,000 remainder, and it will be just as good of a line. I think that's a great approach. I'm going to have exposure to Brandon Aubrey. I'll probably be overweight, and there's probably going to be a line that I play, and we'll get into that in a little bit, where we invest in him, have a ton of salary on the table because he has just as much upside and floor as guys like David Montgomery, Jake Ferguson. And when you're able to, especially on slates like this with value, pretend that CeeDee Lamb's $11,000. If CeeDee was $11,000, I am still interested in this guy. If George Pickens was over 10K, I'm still going to play him. Same thing with both of these quarterbacks. If they were that price, $1,000 more, you would still be playing them just as much. So since they're not, just pretend they were. And that's how you're different on this slate. That I think the everybody is going to be playing some way, shape, or form of the both teams' passing attacks. So if that's going to be the case, leave salary, because everybody's going to be mix and matching the same guys, and it's whoever has that final differentiator. That is the guy to get different if you're going to be doing that. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to go through some must plays, fades, tournament plays, and all that fun stuff. Obviously, you can probably allude to what direction I'm going. But with that said, I'm just going to state them for my claim, plant my flag where I may. So my must play, I don't see a path without an injury or anything of that nature where Dak does not hit the optimal line. I'm not saying you have to play him in the cash spot because he is $10,000. I think because he is $10,400, and I think that there are paths for both Pickens and Lamb to outscore him. But this is one of the best matchups to target. I expect a ton of points, and if Dallas is going to be scoring points in any way, shape, or form, their 3+ touchdown upside, he's going to be involved on at least 2. He has the 300-yard bonus. He has the 3 touchdown upside. He's been playing lights out, especially lately against good opponents. And even though Detroit is a good opponent, this is the best of the bunch in the recent ones that he's played. So I expect him to be in the optimal line in some way, shape, or form, and I don't want to even tinker around with trying to avoid him. In terms of fade, I mentioned David Montgomery as one. I think that one's pretty obvious because he's not going to be that highly owned. But I am going to take a stand. You can hate me if you want to. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not going to be playing. If so, I'm going to be underweight. Maybe I end up playing 5 lines and I just want to have 1 line with him. I don't see the 30-point game from him. And that is the biggest thing on this slate. I think Dak has 30-point upside. I think Lamb has 30-point upside. I think Jameson Williams has 25-point upside. I think George Pickens has 30-point upside. Jahmyr Gibbs, unless he catches 10 balls or scores 2 or 3 touchdowns, which is definitely on the floor, definitely possible, I am not going to be on that side of things in this game. I faded him 2 weeks ago. It was a terrible decision. I faded him last week. It was an awesome decision. This is the tiebreaker week, and I'm going to say that I'm going to be underweight or fading entirely Jahmyr Gibbs. I think you're going to be more happy with how you build your rosters without him. And so I'm going to, unless you go a heavy Dallas build and you just want to pick him up top and have a couple punts down low, that is the only way I really feel this making a line feel really, really good. So I'm going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. If it's obvious, I'm not going to give you the obvious punt play for somebody low owned in a bad matchup. But Jahmyr Gibbs, same matchup, and I don't think this is a ceiling performance. Maybe he hits 20 fantasy points. I don't think that gets you there. It could on a lower scoring slate, but if this is going to be a shootout and he is not the 100-yard upside, he doesn't have multiple touchdowns, he is not going to be in my lines for that very reason. Game script wise, tournament play wise, alluded to him a little bit. He is going to get loose soon, and it is Kevontae Turpin. I just think that they're trying to get him out in space, get him more involved. He's coming off a 61 all-purpose yard game, which was his best since week 3. He's getting around wide receiver 3 snaps, and when he's in there, they're getting the ball in his hands. He had a couple plays against Kansas City where he was just 1 block away or 1 split second from just breaking a 70-yard touchdown. I'm not calling him to have a 60+ yard score, but I think he is going to have a really strong day, especially for being $2,400. So I don't really know how this ownership is going to go, but even if he is going to be more popular, Tom Kennedy, I think because of the name value and what the snaps were last week, maybe Tom does have a little bit more ownership than him, but I feel pretty good about putting in Kevontae Turpin and being overweight to him on this slate. Game script wise, I can't believe I'm saying this, and it doesn't make sense that Dallas goes to plays Philly, gets their lead back, gets a win and a comeback in a down 21-0 comeback effort, and then 4 days later knocks off Kansas City the way they did in a game where Kansas City really needed to win that game. I think that Detroit is allegedly at this very moment the easiest path of a win. If you're just going to put on paper those 3 games, Dallas is going to win 1 game. Which one do they win? I would have said Detroit. And I know it's on the road, but I just would have went with the fact of being in a dome, Detroit being complacent, or Detroit being the style of game where if it is going to be a shootout, that is the game that Dallas wants to be in. If it's going to be a grinded out game, maybe Dallas doesn't fit that or has trouble getting back in those games. Dallas won the hard ones, and I think this is a better matchup for how they're currently playing. So with that said, I'm going to say Dallas wins 30-27. Can't believe I'm saying that, but based on the way they're playing versus the way Detroit's playing, coupled with Amon-Ra likely being out as well. I just think Dallas is trending in the right direction. Detroit's trending in the wrong direction. Didn't expect a couple weeks ago picking the game this way, but that's just how I view it as of this moment. So let's get into some lineup building. And before I do, I just want to mention, if you do see this right here, this 50% coverage token, every single day this week, they're in the promos and rewards. They are putting out these play today. You get this 25% off token. Tonight, for example, they're doing a 25% profit boost for NFL or for an NBA contest. So they're starting to tinker with all these profit boosts that all these other platforms are doing. So if it is applicable to you, because on this one, earn 50% back of your entry up to $2.50. Say you play a $5 contest, $5 single entry. That's all you're going to play. That's totally fine if you want to do that. Half of that's coming back no matter what. So you're playing a $5 contest for $2.50. And what if you take that down? And if you don't, you lose less money. You get it back in promo funds and you can put that to another contest. So very beneficial. And if it's available, why not play it? That's how I'm doing it. Tonight, like I said, a profit boost, and hopefully that pays off in a big way. And if it doesn't, it is what it is. Like, it's only extra things that you can just opt into. So most people forget to do that. If you play frequently, if you set lineups pretty much a lot, play these showdowns, play these mains, these primetime slates, all that fun stuff, make sure you load up on these stuff to elevate your crowns, elevate your profit bonuses, and all that fun stuff. So I'm going to kick it off. And like I said, I'm going to do a build of a double stack on Dallas's side. I don't know if I'm going to be doing, I think if you're going to just play it safe, Dak makes sense in the captain, but I think the upside in this game is going to be mixing, matching CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I don't have a dog in the fight. They're basically the same price. I'm going to be playing those guys as much as possible in these lines, and we figure out what we do from there. Jameson Williams is going to be going in a lot of my lines as well, $8,400. It feels pretty good being overweight to him, but he will be pretty popular for what it's worth. $3,700 per. You can do whatever you want with those lines. If you're playing cash, Tom Kennedy, that's enough for Mr. Brandon Aubrey. If you don't like Tom Kennedy, you want to be a little different, well, flip that. Flip the special teams gadget guy that's the tournament play. So instead of Tom Kennedy, you go Kevontae Turpin, like I mentioned. Jake Bates is the one that kicks multiple field goals in this one. That's enough for that. $0 remaining. Or if you feel better about Kennedy anyway, you put that, leave salary on the table. Don't be afraid to leave salary on the table. That's a big lesson that I've learned this year in the multiple contests that we've taken down. Let's get a little bit different. I want to put a Jameson Williams. I think he's a pretty strong mid-priced captain. He might be one of the most popular. So if you do, don't be afraid to leave some salary on the table. You saw his last game where he had the 29.9 fantasy points. That was the wide receiver one on the Thanksgiving slate. And if he's got that upside and he's $8,400, you bet your butt that everybody's going to be playing that as well. So once again, similar process, but I'm going to try to stack Jared Goff with him this time. Feel much better if I'm going to play a Detroit Lion at captain. I have Jared Goff as that bring back. And instead of George Pickens, you have Jared Goff. Well, we got to get some more skill players in this one. So maybe that's Isaac Tesla to double with that. And then you leave some salary on the table. Once again, Kevontae Turpin. You got $600 remainder. You've got a wide receiver 3 for one team. You got a wide receiver possibly 2 for the other. You got a double stack both ways. I feel great about those kinds of builds. It makes me feel really good. I want to get funky. Let's say if we spin all the way down to the Shane Zylstra I mentioned earlier. Once again, practice window open, was limited on Monday. Don't know what he's doing this week. If he is in play, I just think if there's anybody $1,000 to play, why not take a shot on him instead of spinning up all the way for a Anthony Ferkshire, Ross Dwelly that might be on the field, but they're already priced up. I'd rather have these receivers anyways. But Shane Zylstra at $200, obviously, you can afford whatever you want doing that. This time, a couple extra $100, let's put George Pickens instead of CeeDee at captain. Well, we're still going to play both. Like I said, Dak Prescott is going in every one of my lines. You got $7,800 per for the rest of your line. That's Jameson Williams, 100 short of a Jake Ferguson, which is tough. That would be cool. If you do believe in Dan Montgomery, don't be afraid to do that. But remember what I said earlier. Play a correlated line that, hey, Brandon Aubrey, $400, he has as much floor and has as much upside as a David Montgomery or Jake Ferguson. Go all the way down to him. $5,400, $1,900 remainder. Nobody will have this line. And if you don't like that and you want to be a little bit more safe, put Dak at captain. Obviously, you can still do that with the money that you have on the table. Still have 1,400 remainder. And if you wanted to if you had the Jahmyr Gibbs that you really wanted to force him in on this line, well, then put CeeDee Lamb back in at captain. Take George Pickens out, and either or, whether you put George Pickens or CeeDee Lamb at captain, fade the other. That's enough for Jahmyr Gibbs right there. So you got a 3-3 build. You've got the wide receiver 1 for Detroit, the running back 1 for Detroit, the wide receiver 1-ish for Dallas. Stacking with Dak Prescott, you got Brandon Aubrey in there as well, who's a pretty strong flex. Always, I've been playing him and overweights him all year. But similar to what I said about the others up top, Aubrey going down. Well, I could see a path if Isaac Tisla is going to play 92% of the snaps again, where he scores just as much, if not possibly more, than Brandon Aubrey. Once again, maybe it's a 4-2 build. Maybe I want to be a little bit different. I don't want to go for Detroit skill players with no Jared Goff, so maybe I go down there, go all the way back up to a Kevontae Turpin or a Tom Kennedy. But say you go Kevontae Turpin, once again, the wide receiver 1 and 2 for Detroit with his quarterback, the wide receiver 1A/B at captain, you got Kevontae Turpin in there as well. Dak Prescott, say you want to put a little bit more salary on the table, put in George Pickens instead, 300 remainder. That's really fun. Like I said, I'm going to be mix and matching. Those guys are my guys this week. I don't think there's very much different to be doing. I'm going to give one more look for the people that love Jahmyr Gibbs. What would I do if Jahmyr Gibbs was the captain? He was the 30-point upside guy. Well, again, I'm still putting in because I'm anticipating Detroit. He's scoring multiple touchdowns. Dallas is playing from behind. Dallas is, for what it's worth, 3-point underdog on the road. I'm still going to try to do that and see what I can do. Unfortunately, you can't go with a boom boom to go with 300 remainder. But similar to what I said earlier, say it's Shane Zylstra. Go all the way down. If you don't believe in that and you wanted one of these guys, mix and match, say somebody gets 4 points. I know Jalen Tolbert hasn't caught a pass in 3 straight games, but before that, he had a 2-catch game for a touchdown as well against Denver. Had a catch for 16 yards, 2.6. If none of these guys below 2,000 pan out, there is a path for all of these guys to at least have something. Maybe Anthony Ferkshire gets another target or 2 and catches both of them. That's enough for there. Malik Davis has had some pretty explosive runs in recent games, not really elevating his workload or opportunity. He's getting only 3 carries. He's not even getting receptions. But say he gets 20 yards, 2 fantasy points, 1,400. It's not going to hurt you, especially if you're going all the way up at captain to Jahmyr Gibbs. So that's fine in doing that. Maybe you want to open up a little bit more salary, then you go down to CD at captain instead and put Jahmyr Gibbs back in. That's, once again, that's enough for Tom Kennedy. Then you could do what I was wanting to do earlier, where you go boom, boom. You got the double stack of the big boys up top for Dallas. You got a strong 4-2 build. You've got the top 3 options at receiver for Dallas. Your bring back is Jahmyr Gibbs, the most popular Lion, and then Tom Kennedy, what was the tight end role, even though he is a receiver and skill. Even though he's the receiver and the special teams player, he got the tight end workload, so to speak, last week. So you get 400 remainder. All of that makes sense. It's really fun. This is such a fun slate, guys. I'm so excited. Hopefully it doesn't go in an unexciting football game kind of way, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think of the approach of this slate. If you are new to the channel, please go in our Discord. Again, we put our final exposures and lines in every contest that we play in the Discord. We usually release that about 30 minutes to an hour before the contest. So if it's locking at 7:20, then we're probably going to have it at about 6:45, 7 o'clock, maybe even earlier than that. If you watch the way I built, it was pretty straightforward. It was pretty quick. I didn't hesitate with anything because I am very convicted on how you attack this slate. The biggest difference is just you could take the stand with Jahmyr Gibbs like me to be very different, or I think a very strong approach, once again, putting Brandon Aubrey in for a line that you include Jake Ferguson / David Montgomery, that price range, but put them all the way down for 2,000 remainder, I think is a strong way to get different, leave salary on the table. Is very straightforward with how we're approaching this slate. Shoot, we're going to play Thursday, Monday as well because this is the highest total on the week. And double stacking this game seems a lot of fun for the pricing on that slate as well. So can't thank you guys enough. Please interact with us however you want to do that. We're in December now. We're finishing this year strong. It's been a hell of a year. We're going to be doing a best ball. I'm at least wanting to do a best ball recap because I haven't updated you guys, but it looks pretty good so far. have a lot of bullets that could possibly be advancing into the playoffs. And obviously, you got to be first in your heat the next 2 weeks before you get into the finals. Last year, I only had one bullet in the finals. It was a $3 contest. That one $3 contest did so well that it paid for my entire best ball season, plus a little more. And last year was a pretty down year for me in terms of best ball. So this year, have a lot more bullets, but it doesn't mean anything if we can't get them to the finals. So we're going to let that recap. And after week 17, I want to break down how everything went. And obviously, that was the majority of our summer content. So really, hopefully, we can interact with you guys and you can let us know how it went as well, because we had a whole lot of fun making on live streams, making friends with the people that were in those contests with us and drafting with us on Wednesday nights. So I'm rambling. You know the drill. Thank you guys so much. We will see you on the next one.